Hey everybody, BirdBrain66 here. Once again to bring you another fabulous set of baseball cards. This time it's the 1960s TCMA sets from 1978 and 1981. And there's a little dispute on how many were actually in 81. Is it 188 or 189? So we came up with 189 after looking at that one more time. Could have been a misprint and or a reprinted card due to a jersey, but that's okay. And the set in 1978 was 293 cards. And Brian, what is TCMA and how did they come about?
Great question. So I've been wrong on my assumption of what the heck TCMA has stood for. I mean, probably up until we did this show, I thought it was something to do with trading cards or tops cards or whatever, but it's actually a partnership between two really good friends. So Tom Collier is the photographer who took all of the uh, photos of the players. Some are really good, others are questionable. So it's Tom Collier and his friend Michael Ehrenstein who partnered up, Michael being the collector, and he wanted to put out his own card series. So again, never knew that it was two individuals, always thought it was something to do with trading cards or tops cards, but just two guys like Andy and I who wanted to start a collection of cards. I'm not a professional photographer with those rights. Andy, are you a professional photographer with rights?
No, and today we would be sued greatly by probably by somebody because we would do that. But back in
Right,
the day, you could get away with stuff like that.
right. But these guys have produced under the card title TCMA for a long time. But again, I'd always totally wrong on what it stood for. So there you have it. Two friends, kind of like Andy and I. Well, not kind of like Andy and I, because we are friends,
Right.
but I mean, two guys who started this company, and they sometimes produce some great stuff. Sometimes they produce some questionable stuff. And we'll get into some of the questionable players here in just a few minutes. So, Andy, I'll let you start out. 13 Cardinals in the 78 set. So let's kick that off because that's the first series.
I kind of mixed all mine up here that we'll look at tonight. So if I grab out of the wrong stack, please forgive me. But I'm
No
going to
worries.
start with Mr. Gibson because in the 1960s, he's a pretty dominant pitcher and had some pretty unique things happen in the 1960s. You know, went to the World Series three times, won the World Series twice. And Brian, you know the trivia question I'm about to throw out there. What is it with Bob Gibson in 1968?
Well, do we want to give away the answer? How about it is the most strikeouts ever in a single game?
That's one thing, but what did he win at the end of the season?
For 1968, it was the ERA lead at the 1.18 ERA, and then after that, they raised the mound because the pitcher supposedly had a great advantage over the hitters in 1968.
He also won the National League MVP and the Cy Young Award in 1968.
Has any pitcher done that since? That's the question, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm just throwing it out there. I can't
I'm just
remember.
throwing it out there right now because that will be on the next show that we put out there, whether or not that's actually been done since then. So it's pretty unique that that actually happened. And I believe the most recent person that came close to that was actually Shohei Ohtani. So we will go back and give that answer on our next show. But moving along, there's some really cool cards in here and some, like you said, questionable cards. I'm actually going to go to the 1981 set because we actually have the Gussie Busch card. Well, I call it Gussie Busch card because there he is, right where my index finger is, and with the manager and some of the coaching staff there. So I thought it was interesting that he actually made it onto a card. I think that's probably the only card that he may be on in the history of the St. Louis Cardinals. So just wanted to point that out because you know, a longtime owner of the Cardinals and the Anheuser-Busch establishment there in St. Louis.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that might be his only card ever in a Cardinal uniform, and if not, then we stand corrected. But if there is, it's probably only one other one.
You want to? Well, there you go. That's the great infield card there. Love that card. And yours is actually signed by Dick Groat, which is very
Yep. So this is 1981. So this is the great infield of Bill White, Dick Groat, Hooley, and Ken Boyer. Love it, love it, love it.
And I was getting ready to throw up Mr. Bill White, National League president, long time, and also great Cardinal first baseman back in the day. Very underrated in his place in baseball history. So hopefully someday he will end up in the Hall of Fame. But well, let's go ahead and look at the back one of these. Actually, it tells you it's the 1960s. You see that gives a nice little write up on each of the players, some stats, just like any other baseball card. So they're very, very cool set, some very cool pictures in here. I'd be remiss if I didn't put this individual up, Mr. Red Shandy's.
Shandy's. Yep.
So I always love a Red Shandy's card, as we all know. So I wanted to throw him up. So who are some of your favorites in there, Brian?
I mean, I like the set. I mean, both sets are great. The only thing I can't figure out is the delay from 1978 to 1981.
Right. Yeah.
You know, a couple of years to do this. You always like to show this. I think this is
I,
just a great overall, you know, batting stance of Mike Shannon. Great, again, great shot. That's why this particular set kind of surprises me. I mean, you get some stuff where it's in focus, out of focus, at a distance. This one happens to be nice. So my question is the photographer, Mike Collier, is he actually able to be on the field, or is he taking this? Where is he taking this? I'm sorry, I said Mike. It's Tom Collier who took the photo. Mike is the writer and the collector of these things. But anyway, long story short is, where is he taking this photo from? Is it in the stands? Where? But where does he get access to that? That's one of my more favorite ones. Love this one as well.
Great shot of Curt Flood there.
Yep, going back like you were saying, the back. And the other thing that I appreciate too is that the time to really put together a great bio, because in the 70s when you went to go and you were typing this all up, and then you would take it to the printer and get it all prepared, and any sort of errors that you had to go and correct was always difficult, because I'm using a newspaper term because I used to be a reporter. This is all typeset, and there are you know, certain parameters that have to be met. And then when somebody would come in the 11th hour to make a change, it was pretty difficult. But these cards are beautiful in terms of, you know, the bios on the back, and just you know, for it being more or less a raw type set. Again, given these guys the partnership, you know, great kudos for what they were able to put together on this set. What about you?
Julian Javier, look at that. Long time second baseman for the Cardinals.
So you got to tell people what's the reasoning behind Hooley on the for his name. Remember his nickname Hooley coming from, you know, our friend Mr. Hey, holy cow, Harry Carey.
Right.
Hooley.
Speaking of that, and now his grandson is broadcasting for the Cardinals, which is very ironic.
But basically, the storyline is that Harry couldn't say Julian Javier. He could only spit out after a couple of ice cold Budweisers, I guess. He could only say Hooley, and I'm sorry, that was a really, really poor attempt at doing a Harry Carey impersonation. But anyway, that's how he got his nickname.
Tim Carver.
Beautiful, good action shot.
Yeah, actually, obviously in the cage at that point in time in this photograph. So, like, to your question, it's really, it looks like it's probably spring training or somewhere around that time frame when these were probably taken for the most part. There's Ken Boyer, great Cardinal third baseman, another guy that could be in the Hall of Fame and should be in the Hall of Fame, and hopefully someday will be in the Hall of Fame.
And a great classic shot. I love that one. I mean, it's the same thing as the one I just showed a few seconds ago of Curt Flood. I love this shot where they're on one knee and they're using the bat kind of to hold themselves up, or whatever you want to call it, but just great photography there. Then this one cracks me up.
Oh yeah, that's a nice shot there.
Okay, what are we doing here, Tito? If you're the photographer, come on. I mean, you have an opportunity. So another one of these things that I've made fun of over the years is sometimes I feel like the photographer goes up and tells the player that they're going to take the shot, and they click one frame and that's it, and you get what you get. And I'm like, Tito Francona, come on. I mean, it's nothing against him. He may have been, doing whatever, and there's no
So
rhyme or reason why they picked that shot.
so yeah, great sets. So the 1960s were pretty interesting for the Cardinals. Like I said, they got the two World Series championships out of there. Had some great players in the 60s, and they've always had great players with St. Louis. But some pretty unique things happened in St. Louis in the 1960s, and I'd be pretty remiss. And I know this is not really baseball related, but we got the St. Louis Football Cardinals in 1960. So there they are, the 1960 team.
Coming over from Chicago.
Chicago. Yep. The 12 owners at the time voted and decided that the St. Louis was a good fit, and they moved the team to St. Louis. And also in the late 60s, we are also blessed with getting a hockey team, St. Louis Blues. So I put the Red Baron up there just so everybody could see from the first series of top Blues cards. Just to have a little bit of diversity in our set, because we know there are a lot of collectors out there, not necessarily always baseball. So we'll throw a little football and hockey at you here now and then, and that kind of fit into the theme of the 1960s. So that's why I brought those out there. No other reason than that, but maybe see some other ones down the road. But,
Fun story about Red 1990. I got to interview him in my sports writing days during my segments of the St. Louis Blues during the hockey season. They gave this young snot-nosed guy who was still in J school getting ready to graduate. They go, how would you like to interview a whole bunch of the former St. Louis Blues players? And I was like, sure, I'll take it on. And Red Berenson was one of my great classic interviews. Such a great individual. Had a blast talking to him, and I'm been frantically going through some of my archives in my own basement, and so far I can't find any of the binders. I hope to God I saved them from my move from my house where I was living at, which was my parents' house. I'll be brutally honest. When I was in college, I was a drive back and forth kind of guy. I didn't live on campus because I had a job working at the News Democrat. But Red Berenson, I'll always remember.
You were a college student with a job? Oh my, with a job?
Yes,
Man, that's
how
about
to.
that?
Yeah, and had to pay for my part of my college when I was still living at home. So it was always great when athletes would call the house when I was in class, and somebody would take a note and say, "Did you know that Red Berenson left you a message?" Or Gary Unger, or when I actually did the football Cardinals too. And since you showed the that team photo, just remember when my dad was literally brought to his knees when Conrad Dobler called the house and I wasn't home. And my dad said, well, I'd like to talk to him. I'm like, Dad, you're going to talk to him as a fan. I'm going to talk to him as a reporter. Big difference.
Exactly. But yeah, I must have had some psychic abilities to know you were going to tell that Red Berenson story there. So that's why I had a choice of about 9 cards there to pull from. So that's the
Well,
one.
who are your other 9? Let's see. Go ahead and tempt us, because I may have interviewed those guys too.
We will get to that at another time. I don't want to pull out right now.
All right.
We
don't know.
want to segue into some other things. And so the 1960s, obviously, I always try to get a Van Halen reference in there. So I do have a couple of Van Halen references for our show.
Please do.
What's that?
I said, please do.
Actually, Valerie Bertinelli was born in 1960, Gary Cherone in 1961, and You Really Got Me and Where Have All the Good Times Gone were released by the Kinks in the 1960s. So, and as we know, they were covered by Van Halen, back in the debut album, You Really Got Me, because that kind of launched Van Halen with Eddie's unique sound on that song, and then on Diver Down with Where Have All the Good Times Gone. So there's your Van Halen reference from the 1960s.
And I have plenty of Kinks music that I listen to as well, because I just have always been thrilled with the writing. I mean, and I say writing, I mean the prolific writing.
You probably listen to them all the day and all the night.
Yeah, nice. I like what you did there.
Yeah.
Very good. No, I mean they just got so many good songs. So
Yep.
love listening to them. And then of course um, listening to Eruption and hearing that for the first time, I can remember exactly where I was and how I just instantly became a fan. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm going to listen to Van Halen. I mean, like I was just like instantly drawn in by
The
what a
sound,
great
it's just like,
the sound. Yeah, unique. So I've only a couple of other bands have ever done that to me, and I'm going to show my age because I'm too
are you gonna say were you gonna say the Bay City Rollers?
Saturday. No, I wasn't. I was going to say the Beatles, even though I'm
Right.
not old enough to appreciate that, but my parents listened to them enough. But definitely the Beatles and VH and a couple other bands. So
Definitely.
yeah. So anybody
Well,
else here that jumps out before we go back to or one more music reference before we go back to the cards, because we haven't even talked about the ones that we're questioning, like the Lee Elias and some of these other cards. So I'll let you jump in with one of them, and I'll try to pull one here out of my pages here.
well, to be
Why,
honest,
why the
I
heck are these
just,
guys in the collection?
yeah, it's puzzling to say the least, with, how some of these guys wound up in the set or why they wound up in the set. And I cannot get that card out of my jacket for some reason. What is up with that?
Here we go. I'm going to pull the first one.
Pull it out.
Future Cubs manager.
There,
Never played lick with the Cardinals, but he is actually not even in a Cardinals uniform. But somehow I think this goes back to my old cut and paste days of being a reporter, where this was the template on the back and everybody laid everything into the right spot. And then somebody didn't do a proofread and forgot that, oh, shoot, Lee Elia did not play for the Cardinals, but it was left on the page and it went
and he
to
wound
print.
up in the set. How cool is that? There you
And
have it.
he wound up in the set. He's in the database and he's in all the other things that we use to track cards. And guess what? It's painfully obvious that
Counted.
Andy has to count it. Bam.
Yep.
So there's Jim McKnight. I'm trying to remember who. There's one other guy in here, and my other personal favorite, because this guy is one of the high numbers in one of the top sets in the '60s, Mr. Mel Nelson.
Yeah.
And why to goodness he's in this set? But thankfully I have it. Thankfully you have it, but it's like, why? But
Yep.
anyway, there's Mr. Mel Nelson. So there's several of those in this 1978, in addition to 1981, 1960s sets from TCMA.
Well, Brian, you want to wrap us up and close us out on this episode?
So I would definitely like to do that. So, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us as always. We're going to start kind of doing a little bit of different things here, having some more music reference, having some more St. Louis sports collectibles in here. I may break out my old autograph book from the St. Louis football Cardinals. Andy's got some other really, really cool stuff, but we want to say thanks again for joining us as we reviewed these two sets that are set one and set two from TCMA. And you can find us on BirdBrain66 at BirdBrain66 on Twitter, on Facebook, and now on Instagram. And of course, we're always here on YouTube when we're doing our team set reviews. So thanks everybody for joining us. Please continue to follow us, and we appreciate the likes and the shares.
Yep. Thanks, everybody.